Hey everybody, did you know that Texas and other states are under a military occupation? This is brought to you by the Republic of Texas. First of all, the Civil War was an undeclared war and there was no peace treaty. That's the first point I want to make. And notice the Republic of Texas seal on the left, and on the right is the Republic of Texas in 1836, which is actually could be considered the boundaries today. In fact, if you go to like some of that, like up in the northern part there, that's up in Wyoming, and if you go to the Wyoming legislature, you will see a Texas flag flying there. As well as Colorado, New Mexico, Oklahoma, and Kansas, and Louisiana also have Texas flags flying, which suggests that each of those states have part of what was once Texas and what still could be Texas in them. Anyways, this is talking about a military occupation. Territory is considered occupied when it is actually placed under the authority of the hostile army. The occupation extends only to the territory where such authority has been established and can be exercised. And that's the Hague Convention 4, Article 42, the laws and customs of war on land. And this is Article 2 of the Geneva Convention relative to the protection of civilians in a time of war of 1949. In addition to the provisions which shall be implemented in peacetime, the present convention shall apply to all cases of declared war or of any other conflict which may arise between two or more of the high contracting parties, even if the state of war is not recognized by one of them. The convention shall also apply to all cases of partial or total occupation of the territory of a high contracting party, even if the said occupation meets with no armed resistance. So, first of all, if there's state of war is not recognized by one of them, it still applies. It's all declared war or any other armed conflict, and it also applies even if there's no armed resistance. And although one of the powers in the conflict may not be a party to the present convention, the powers who are parties thereto shall remain bound by it in their mutual relations. They shall furthermore be bound by the convention in relation to the said power if the latter accepts and applies the provisions. So, again, even if both of the parties are not parties to this particular convention, the parties that are participants in this convention have to still follow the rules. And so anyway, so that's the Article 2 of the Geneva Convention relative to the protection of civilians in time of war. And this is Article 1 of the Lieber Code. A place, district, or country occupied by an army stands in consequence of the occupation under the martial law of the invading or occupying army, whether any proclamation declaring martial law or any public warning to the inhabitants has been issued or not. Martial law is the immediate and direct effect and consequence of occupation or conquest. The presence of a hostile army proclaims its martial law. So Texas, it's well known that Texas was invaded by the District of Columbia Army, which is called the United States Army, but really it's the District of Columbia Army. And that's well documented. So Texas was occupied, and it's still occupied to this day. When you take back here, Article 2, the Geneva Convention relative to the protection of civilians in time of war of 1949, and some other stuff we're going to show you. This is Article 2 of the Lieber Code. Martial law does not cease during a hostile occupation except by special proclamation ordered by the Commander-in-Chief or by special mention in the Treaty of Peace concluding the war, when the occupation of a place or territory continues beyond the conclusion of peace as one of the conditions of the same. And so the point being here is that there was no Treaty of Peace, and there's been no proclamation. So martial law has not ceased, okay? Texas is still under a military occupation. to this day. And now a little diversion. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. And don't forget to click on the bell next to the subscribe button so that you're notified when there's a new upload. We're going to try and upload one a week right now, and it's going to increase as we get moving to where maybe at some point we'll be doing 5 a week. I guess it depends on, the topics and things like that. But this is all going to be Republic of Texas videos. This is the channel. This is if you look at the bell, the arrow is pointing at the bell that you have to click next to the subscribe button, and then that way you will be notified. A little pop-up will come up, and it will ask you if you want to be notified, and the answer to that is yes. Anyways, okay, so this is a book called The Non-Ratification of the 14th Amendment by Judge A.H. Eller to the Utah Supreme Court, and it's associated with the case Diet versus Turner. It's about a 150-page book, but it's double-spaced, so it reads pretty fast. Anyways, despite the fact that the southern states have been functioning peacefully for 2 years and had been counted to secure ratification of the 13th Amendment, Congress passed the Reconstruction Act, March 2nd, 1867, which provided for the military occupation of 10 of the 11 southern states. It excluded Tennessee from military occupation, and one must suspect it was because Tennessee had ratified the 14th Amendment on July 7th, 1866. So, the Constitution, there's a certain procedure for ratifying amendments to the Constitution, and they can't force you at the end of a gun to ratify an amendment. I mean, that's not a contract. Tennessee obviously ratified it, but the rest of the states didn't. And then this is also in Diet versus, in this case, non-ratification of the 14th Amendment. By Judge A.H. Eller to the Utah Supreme Court in the case Diet versus Turner. He basically puts notes. He has the whole Lieber Code in there, and he puts in notes that talk about the different articles. Anyways, he says, note, there is no treaty of peace between the Union and the several states that is known of, and the end of full martial law was finally declared by the withdrawal of troops in the streets. But the repeal of all forms of law martial has never been declared. So again, there's 3 kinds of martial law. We're going to go through that in a second. So no treaty of peace, and there's been no proclamation. This is another one of the notes that he put in there. This is related to Article 3. And note, under law martial, only the criminal jurisdiction of a military court is the recognized law. But as Article 3 says, the civil courts can continue wholly or in part as long as the civil jurisdiction does not violate the military orders laid down by the commander-in-chief or one of his commanders. By this means, a military venue jurisdiction and authority are imposed upon the occupied populace under the disguise of the ordinary civil courts and officers of the occupied district or region, because the so-called civil authorities in an occupied district or region only act at the pleasure of a military authority. It should also be noted here that the several state legislatures, county boards of commissioners, and city councils are constantly legislating to please the edicts of the federal government, the occupying force, and that their legislation in this sense is not an exercise of state sovereignty, but instead a compliance with the edicts of the military force which occupies the several states, and consequently are edicts of martial law rule. So the point being is that, it's all a fraud, okay? They don't want to tell you that you're under a military occupation. They're trying to hide it as much as they can because people revolt, against that kind of stuff. And I'm certainly not encouraging anybody to revolt. There's peaceful ways that we can assert ourselves, and under the UN documents and the right of self-determination, Texas can still be sovereign and independent. but we have to, get together and assert ourselves is what we really have to do. And it's not by force. It can be done through the courts. Anyways, so Texas under martial law, there's 3 kinds of martial law. There's full martial law, there's martial law proper, and there's martial law rule. And that is taken from the Supreme Court case, U.S. Supreme Court case, Ex parte Milligan, which is a Civil War era case. And it's cited in this book, The Non-Ratification of the 14th Amendment by Judge A.H. Ellett of the Utah Supreme Court, and in this case, Diet versus Turner. Now, full martial law is when there's open warfare. Troops are on the street. Sometimes they're shooting at each other. But regardless, the troops are on the street. There's troops everywhere. Okay, that's full martial law. Martial law proper is the law of the armed forces. That's where a sergeant tells a private what to do. And martial law rule is the law of emergency and necessity and can go on for decades or even centuries. There are 2 ways to conquer and enslave a nation. One is by the sword, and the other is by debt. So you can actually get martial law 2 different ways. In Texas' case, and in most of the states, the southern states, it's by the sword. And actually, I can also show that it was the western states, the Treaty of Hidalgo. There's nothing in there ending martial law. Anyways, and that's John Adams, 1826. This is Revised Code of Washington. Okay, so Washington, under executive order, was put under martial law, which means all of the United States, actually. That was 1942. Revised Code of Washington, 116.090, Legislative Declaration for Civil Liberties, Day of Remembrance. Okay, so I guess they want to remember the day they had civil liberties. Because they don't anymore. The legislature recognizes that on February 19, 1942, the President of the United States issued Executive Order 9066, which authorized military rule over the civilian law and lives. So I guess they're celebrating the day when they used to have civil liberties. It's not very funny, but, all you can do is laugh at it sometimes. So evidence that there's a military occupation. Military script is circulated for money. Well, that's Federal Reserve notes, people. Police use the rank structure of captain, lieutenant, sergeant. Police refer to non-police as civilians. Courts presume everything, and that's one of the biggest things about martial law is presumption. They presume everything, and so then you have to defeat their presumptions. Curfew is strictly under martial law jurisdiction. Now, curfews don't happen all the time, but you do see them happen. Halloween night, things like that. That's all martial law. State regional areas under metro government provide the military venue for peace officers to enforce martial law jurisdiction. So we're talking about metro police departments, Dallas Metro Police Department, Fort Worth, various areas where they have metro police. I mean, that's all martial law. And this is Article 6 of the Geneva Convention relative to the protection of civilians in time of war. So we've established that Texas is under martial law, has been since the Civil War, and under military occupation, has been since the Civil War. And so now what we establish is what articles of this Geneva Convention relative to the protection of civilians in a time of war still apply. Well, we're going to find that out right now. The present convention shall apply from the outset of any conflict or occupation mentioned in Article 2. That's the one we already had. In the territory of parties to the conflict, the application of the present covenant shall cease on the general close of military operations, okay? Which, they're saying that it ends, okay, the application of this convention, but parts of it don't. In the case of occupied territory, the application of the present convention shall cease 1 year after the general close of military operations. However, the occupying power shall be bound for the duration of the occupation to the extent that such power exercises the functions of government in such territory by the provisions of the following articles to the present convention. And there's a bunch of them, 1 through 12, 27, 29 to 34, 47. We're going to talk about just a few of them because we can show that that there's some violations going on, okay? And at least in Texas. And actually in every state, I'm sure that people can show that there's violations, but it's going to be individuals, but you got to show it. Article 27, okay, so it says here 1 to 12 and 27, okay, so this is Article 27. Protected persons are entitled in all circumstances to respect for their persons, their honor, their family rights, their religious convictions and practices, and their manners and customs. Well, you know, these Satanists, these DC Satanists are assaulting people with their satanic religious ceremonies and their kangaroo courts, okay? That's a religious thing, okay? That's all coming from the Roman cult, okay? So that's a violation. They shall at all times be humanely treated, shall be protected especially against all acts of violence or threats thereof, against insults and public curiosity. Well, you know, selling people into slavery is not what I would call being humanely treated. As a matter of fact, I'd call that cruel and unusual punishment. And in their own international covenants that they've agreed to, they cannot sell people into slavery. Women shall be especially protected against any attack on their honor, in particular against rape and forced prostitution or any form of indecent assault. Well, that one's, they go after people for that kind of stuff. That's true. Without prejudice to the provisions relating to their state of health, age, and sex, all protected persons shall be treated with the same consideration by the party to the conflict in whose power they are, without any adverse distinction based in particular on race, religion, or political opinion. That's not happening. In particular religion or political opinion, okay? They're assaulting people from the Republic of Texas because they happen to be people from the Republic of Texas, okay? And so that's a violation, and we're getting ready to bring that into the courts. Actually, there's people that are already doing it. And the religion issue again, okay? Because they're assaulting people with their Roman cult satanic religious ceremonies and their kangaroo courts. However, the parties to the conflict may make such measures of control and security in regard to protected persons as may be necessary as a result of the war. Well, the war is over a long time ago, and so they can't claim anything under that. And this is Article 33. No protected person may be punished for an offense he or she has not personally committed. Collective penalties and likewise all measures of intimidation or of terrorism are prohibited. Well, you have these revenue officers running around with their military uniforms that are specifically designed, and their police cars that are designed to be threatening and intimidating, okay? And they're terrorists, okay? There's lots of terrorism going on. We're going to talk about that later. And so that's a problem, okay? And they're engaging in that on a huge scale, terrorism and intimidation. Pillage, okay, and they're engaging in that on a huge scale. They're stealing people's property under the guise of, whatever they feel like doing, okay. Reprisals against protected persons and their property are prohibited. Well, they're engaging in that, and there's litigation that's coming up over that. Anyways, and then there's Article 51. The occupying power may not compel persons to serve in its armed or auxiliary forces. No pressure or propaganda which aims at securing voluntary enlistment is permitted. Well, you know, they put these selective service registration forms in the post offices, so that's pressure, that's propaganda, that's lies. Propaganda's lies at securing voluntary enlistment, okay? So they're doing that on a wholesale basis all over the place. Now, if you understand the law, it really doesn't apply to anybody. There's YouTube videos up that talk about how not to volunteer for the selective service. But the bottom line is those they should not even be asking. Matter of fact, some states like Arizona, you automatically are, when you apply for a driver's license, then you're just automatically registered for the selective service. Matter of fact, I think I'm going to serve a registered letter on the Arizona Attorney General because I think that's exactly what I'm going to do. Matter of fact, maybe I'll send it to the U.S. Attorney General and complain about the Arizona Attorney General doing that and get him slapped from great heights. I love doing that. Anyways, so that's Article 51. And this is Article 52. No contract, agreement, or regulation shall impair the right of any worker, whether voluntary or not, and wherever he may be, to apply to the representatives of the protecting power in order to request the said power's intervention. Well, they're kangaroo courts. They sell their justice all the time. That's a contract. Matter of fact, if you go what happens, I've had them claim bad faith. Okay, well, that's breach of contract. And so I rail on them over that. And agreement or regulation shall impair the right of any worker, so they can't. They're court rules. Okay, they're. Matter of fact, I have a lawsuit right now that I just went to the Ninth Circuit, and it's going to the Supreme Court. I don't care what the Ninth Circuit says. I'm going to take it to the Supreme Court to these whores. And so even if they rule in my favor, I'm going to appeal it. Anyways, then that's Article 52. In case of a breach of the penal provisions promulgated by it by virtue of the second paragraph of Article 64, the occupying power may hand over the accused to its properly constituted non-political military courts. Well, all the courts are clearly military, but they're also bought and paid for, and they're not properly constituted. And on condition that the said courts sit in the occupied country, and then courts of appeal shall preferably sit in the occupied country, while the federal courts, the state courts probably sit here, but the federal courts definitely don't sit here. And so, anyways, there's violations there. I'm going to bring some of that up. This is the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, Article 1, Clause 3. The state parties to the present covenant, including those having responsibility for the administration of non-self-governing and trust territories, well, that's occupied territory, shall promote the realization of the right of self-determination and shall respect that right in conformity with the provisions of the Charter of the UN. And so they've agreed to that too. And so this is all coming from the UN, the Roman law, and the Roman cult, quite frankly. And I don't particularly like taking advantage of UN because I think they're Satanists too. But you got to do what you got to do. I mean, these people, it's war. Okay, these people, that's all they know how to do is war. That's the Roman cult, is where it's coming from. This is Article 14, Clause 1 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. All persons shall be equal before the courts and tribunals in the determination of any civil criminal charge against him or of his rights and obligations in a suit of law. Okay, so it doesn't matter whether civil or criminal. Everyone shall be entitled to a fair and public hearing by a competent, independent, and impartial tribunal established by law. Well, they're not impartial. They're bought and paid for. And they're not even competent to do justice because they're bought and paid for. It's a show trial. It's a kangaroo court. And I show that in YouTube videos all the time. So war is business. Okay, that's what these Satanists do. They like to get in business. This is all coming from the Roman cult. That awkward moment when you realize the same government that's supposed to protect us from the terrorist is the terrorist. Okay, so there we have some terrorists right there. They're order followers. They're cowards too. Okay, that's typical of these Satanists because they want to hide their identity. They don't want to be held responsible. They got them wearing ski masks and stuff like that. They're cowards, and so they know they're going to go and do stuff that they shouldn't be doing. And this is Gestapo. This is what it is, and it's all intended to be intimidating with these military uniforms and all of that stuff. And get a load of this, okay? These are the military shock troops. If you think this is for your protection, you clearly have no idea what's going on. They have armored vehicles. These are all Satanists. They're order followers, and they're cowards, okay? Look at how they operate in packs. It's like a street gang. That's exactly what it is. It's a street gang. They have all their high technology and their armored vehicles and all of that stuff. Can you spot the terrorists? Okay, remember it comes down to terrorism again. That's unconstitutional or illegal according to their own International Geneva Convention relative to the treatment of civilians in a time of war. They have no right to be terrorizing people. Terrorism is a noun, the use of violence and intimidation in the pursuit of political aims. Okay, so that's exactly what's going on. And there's more of these Satanist cowards. Okay, see, they have their bulletproof vests and their helmets and all of this stuff. Warning: this is the standing army you were told not to tolerate. And again, they have to operate in gangs because they're cowards. That's exactly what it is. This is nothing but a street gang. War is when your government tells you who the enemy is. Revolution is when you figure it out for yourself. And I'm certainly not saying that we should do anything violent. Actually, I think that we can do it peacefully. And we just have to get together and stand up and say, sorry, we're not going to play your game anymore. Conspiracy theorist, someone who questions the statements of known liars. I guess I'm a conspiracy theorist because I question the statements of known liars. Anyways, so the Republic of Texas. Look at that map. See, there's parts of all the states that used to be in the Republic of Texas and may still be. Wyoming, Colorado, Kansas, Oklahoma, New Mexico. I've even heard that Louisiana, parts of Louisiana too, but it doesn't look like it based on that map. But anyways, are you tired of the kangaroo courts? Are you tired of the extortion they call taxes? Are you tired of schools that don't teach? Are you tired of corrupt bureaucrats? Are you tired of revenue officers masquerading as peace officers? Are you tired of victimless crimes? Are you tired of the police state? Are you tired of not really owning your land? Under the Texas Constitution, the land is always supposed to belong to the people. Are you tired of the Satanism that seems to be everywhere? Because these people were Satanists, okay? This is all coming from the Roman cult. Are you tired of being compelled to work for the government by being compelled to provide a government employee's social security number even when you're not really working for the government? That's a violation too. They can't compel you to work for the government. That's what they're doing. The Republic of Texas is alive and well and here to offer you a peaceful alternative to the current tyranny being imposed by the Roman cult owned and operated District of Columbia. This is all coming from the District of Columbia and the Roman cult. That's exactly where it's coming from. To find like-minded people who are interested in good government, freedom, and independence, go to thetexasrepublic.com. That's thetexasrepublic.com. To find out how you can participate in your lawful Christian government, go to thetexasrepublic.com. The only way that we're going to have freedom is by Christian government. Now, that does not mean that the government associates itself with any particular church, but it definitely has to be Christian. I mean, why do you think people swear in the courts on the Bible? Because it's Christian. It was always Christian, but it's been taken over by Satanists is what's happened. Anyways, to find out how you can participate in your lawful Christian government, go to thetexasrepublic.com. Thanks for watching, folks, and we're going to be coming out with them regularly, so don't forget to subscribe. Bye for now.